morning they found the grave open, everyone panicked. "Grave robber!" they shouted. But cemetery night watchman Harold remained calm. Because this wasn't just robbery. The body was missing, but the coffin was still there. The soil had been professionally arranged. This was organ harvesting. And Harold had seen cases like this before. Welcome to Echo Stories. Before we begin this powerful story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. Riverside Cemetery in Salem, Oregon, had been operating since 1847. Sprawling across 200 acres of rolling hills, it housed over 50,000 graves. During the day, it was peaceful. Families visiting loved ones, groundskeepers maintaining the grounds. At night, it belonged to Harold Winters. Harold had been the night watchman for 25 years, 68 years old, quiet, methodical. He walked his rounds from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. 7 days a week. Never called in sick, never complained. The cemetery board considered him their most reliable employee. What they didn't know was Harold's background. His personnel file simply listed previous law enforcement experience. No details, no questions asked. Harold preferred it that way. Every night, Harold walked the same route. Main entrance to the mausoleum, through the older sections, past the maintenance shed, back to the front gate. 4 miles total. He knew every headstone, every tree, every shadow. Changes didn't escape his notice. This Tuesday night started like any other. Harold punched in at 9:45 p.m., grabbed his flashlight and radio, began his first round. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching under his boots. Nothing unusual. Until he reached Section C, Harold stopped at the Morrison family plot. Something was different. The grass around Margaret Morrison's grave, buried just 6 days ago, looked disturbed. Not wind-blown or weather-damaged, deliberately moved. Harold knelt down, examined the area with his flashlight. The sod had been carefully replaced, but the edges didn't match. Professional work, but not perfect. Someone had been digging here. His radio crackled. "Harold, everything okay out there?" "All quiet. Dispatch." Continuing rounds. But Harold's mind was racing. 30 years as an FBI forensic investigator had taught him to read crime scenes. This wasn't vandalism or random mischief. This was systematic, organized, purposeful. Harold noted the location, continued his rounds. But now he was watching for other signs. Tire tracks near service roads, footprints in soft earth, anything out of place. By 2 a.m., he had found 3 more disturbed graves, all recent burials, within the last 2 weeks. All professionally concealed but visible to trained eyes. Harold returned to his guard shack, pulled out a cemetery map. He marked the 4 locations. They weren't random. All positioned near service roads, all easily accessible by vehicle. All fresh burials with minimal family visitation expected. This was reconnaissance-based. Someone had scouted these locations, planned carefully, executed with precision. Harold had seen this methodology before, but never in a cemetery context. He considered calling the police immediately. But without evidence beyond disturbed soil, they'd dismiss it as an old man's imagination. Harold needed more proof. Harold decided to alter his patrol pattern. Instead of predictable rounds, he would stake out Section C. If the perpetrators returned, he'd be ready. At 3:30 a.m., Harold positioned himself behind the maintenance shed with clear sight lines to the Morrison grave, and waited. At 4:15 a.m., headlights appeared on the service road, no sound. Vehicle running silent, lights dimmed. Harold watched through binoculars as a panel van approached Margaret Morrison's grave. 3 men got out. They moved with purpose, no wasted motion. One began digging while 2 others set up portable lighting, professional tools, organized system. Harold radioed dispatch. "This is Harold. I need police backup at Section C immediately. Grave desecration in progress." "Are you sure, Harold?" "It's probably just..." "I'm sure. Multiple suspects, professional operation. Send backup now." Harold continued observing. Within 30 minutes, the men had exhumed Margaret Morrison's casket, but they didn't take jewelry or valuables. They opened the casket, removed the body, and began what appeared to be surgical procedures, organ harvesting. Harold's blood ran cold. Harold faced a choice: wait for backup that might arrive too late or intervene immediately. His FBI training said wait for support. His conscience said act now. Harold approached from the tree line, staying in shadows. The men were focused on their work, didn't notice him advancing. Harold got close enough to see their operation clearly. Surgical instruments, coolers packed with ice, professional medical equipment. This wasn't grave robbing. This was organized crime using freshly buried bodies for black market organs. Police! Nobody move! The three men spun around, startled. One reached for a weapon. I said, don't move. Harold's voice carried 30 years of law enforcement authority. You're just a cemetery guard, old man, one of them said. Walk away. Actually, Harold replied, I'm former FBI, and you're under citizen's arrest for desecration of human remains and medical fraud. The man with the weapon raised it toward Harold, but Harold's reflexes, honed by decades of field work, were faster. He dove behind a headstone as the shot rang out. Bad choice, Harold muttered. He knew this terrain better than anyone, and he knew how to use cover and concealment. Harold worked his way around their position, using monuments and mausoleums for protection. The men were armed but panicked, firing wildly into darkness. Harold's radio crackled. Harold, back up en route. ETA 8 minutes. 8 minutes was too long. These men would either escape or eliminate the evidence. Harold had to act. Using his knowledge of FBI tactical procedures, Harold began systematically neutralizing the threat. Distraction here, flanking movement there. The men were dangerous but undisciplined. Within 5 minutes, Harold had disarmed 2 of the 3 men and had the leader cornered behind their van. You don't understand, the leader shouted. We're saving lives. These organs go to people who need them. By desecrating graves and stealing from families, Harold replied. That's not medicine, that's grave robbing with a scalpel. Police arrived to find Harold had subdued all 3 suspects. In their van, investigators discovered surgical equipment, transplant coolers, and documentation revealing a much larger operation. Detective Sarah Chen interviewed Harold. How did you know this was organ trafficking? Pattern recognition, professional tools, recent graves, surgical precision. I worked similar cases with the Bureau. The Bureau? FBI. Harold nodded. Forensic investigation, 1985 to 2015. Specialized in medical fraud and body trafficking. Why didn't you tell us you were former FBI? Because I wanted a quiet retirement, night shifts, peaceful cemetery, no more crime scenes. Detective Chen looked around at the evidence being collected. Doesn't look very peaceful tonight. Sometimes peaceful has to wait. The arrests led to a massive investigation. The 3 men were part of an international organ trafficking network using funeral homes and cemeteries across the Pacific Northwest. Harold's detailed observations and FBI experience proved crucial. He could read the crime scene like a book, identify patterns other investigators missed. Harold, Detective Chen asked, would you consider consulting on this case? I'm retired from law enforcement. This network has been operating for years. We need someone who understands both forensics and medical fraud. Harold looked across the cemetery grounds, his peaceful domain now a crime scene. What do you need to know? Harold's forensic background revealed the full scope of the operation. The network had been targeting recent burials, extracting valuable organs, then carefully reburying the bodies to delay discovery. They're sophisticated, Harold explained to the task force. Medical knowledge, legal access to funeral systems, international distribution network. This isn't street crime. This is organized medical fraud. Harold's analysis helped investigators identify 17 other compromised graves across 4 states. Each case followed the same pattern Harold had recognized that first night. How did you spot this so quickly? Detective Chen asked. 30 years of looking at crime scenes. The details tell the story if you know how to read them. Word spread through Salem about Harold's role in exposing the network. Cemetery families were grateful their loved one's dignity had been protected. Mr. Winters, one woman approached him, you saved my mother from being violated after death. Harold was uncomfortable with praise. I just did my job, ma'am. Your job is night watchman. This was something more. Sometimes being a good watchman means watching for more than vandals. The cemetery board offered Harold a promotion, security consultant position. Harold declined. I like walking my rounds, he said. Keeps me connected to the community. even the part that's passed on. Local news wanted to interview the hero cemetery guard who caught organ thieves. Harold refused all interviews. "I'm not a story," Harold told reporters. "I'm just someone who noticed something wrong and did something about it." National news picked up the story anyway. Former FBI agent working as cemetery guard exposes international organ trafficking network. Harold stopped reading the coverage. Fame was never the point, he told Detective Chen. Justice was. 3 months later, Harold resumed his normal patrol routine. The cemetery was peaceful again. No more crime scene tape or investigative teams, but now families stopped him during day visits. "Thank you for protecting our loved ones," they'd say. Harold would nod, tip his cap, continue walking. Other cemetery workers treated him differently too, not just as the night watchman, but as someone who had proven dedication beyond the job description. "Harold," the groundskeeper asked, "do you ever miss FBI work?" "I miss the purpose," Harold replied, "knowing that what you do matters." "And now?" Harold looked across the peaceful grounds. "Now I protect people who can't protect themselves. That matters too." Harold's awareness had heightened since the incident. He noticed things other watchmen might miss: unusual vehicle patterns, suspicious visitors, changes in routine. The FBI task force stayed in touch. "Harold, we've identified similar patterns in other states. Would you review some crime scene photos?" Harold agreed to limited consulting. His expertise had proven invaluable in understanding criminal methodology. "Why do you think they targeted cemeteries?" a young agent asked. "Because people assume the dead are safe," Harold replied. "Criminals count on that assumption." Alone during his midnight rounds, Harold reflected on the case. 30 years of FBI work had led to this moment, protecting the dignity of the deceased. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd retired from investigating crime only to stumble into one of the most sophisticated operations he had ever encountered. But this felt different from his bureau days. This was personal. These weren't distant victims in case files. These were members of his community, families he saw visiting graves. 1 year later, Harold still walked his rounds at Riverside Cemetery. The organ trafficking network had been dismantled, 23 arrests made across 6 states. Harold's role in the investigation remained largely unknown to the public. He preferred it that way. New visitors sometimes asked about the famous cemetery guard who caught the criminals. Harold would redirect them. "That's ancient history. Can I help you find a specific grave?" Detective Chen visited occasionally. "Any regrets about getting involved?" "Only that it took so long to notice," Harold replied. "The network had been operating for 3 years before you spotted them." "Then I should have been more observant." Harold continued his watch. Silent guardian of the silent residents. Some protection extends beyond life, and some guardians never really retire. And so, in a Salem cemetery, it was proven once again that the most powerful protectors often hide in the most unexpected places. A night watchman who seemed ordinary was actually an expert investigator. But more importantly, that expert had chosen to serve in a different way. Real protectors are like this. They move from hunting criminals to guarding communities, from solving cases to preventing crimes, from seeking justice for the living to protecting dignity for the departed. If this story meant something to you, share your thoughts in the comments. If you believe stories like this should continue to be told, support Echo Stories by subscribing. See you in the next video. And remember, that quiet guardian watching over places you consider safe might have protected more than you'll ever know. Everyone has a story, and that story deserves respect.